Hello and welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. This interview was originally planned for 3D Joes, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the interview will now be presented here instead for your viewing pleasure. I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. I am joined by my special guest today, Vinnie D'Alleva. He was the VP of Marketing for Hasbro from 1989 to 1999. He did initiatives on the Battle Corps, Ninja Force, DEF, Eco Warriors, Mega Marines, and Star Brigade. He helped launch Masterpiece Collection and the Hall of Fame Collection. Welcome, Vinnie, to the show. It is a pleasure to be speaking with you and to be able to spend time with you.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So this is a special episode because we're kind of doing a preview for the Armor 4, which if you're not familiar with Armor, it is the assembly required mass online rally. Armor 4 was started 4 or 5 years ago during COVID, where people could not get together in person to do conventions, and Assembly Required had been doing a convention for 10 years up in Des Moines, Iowa. So this is a creation of Brian Sauer, and he created an online convention where people could come, watch events, talk about different aspects of the G.I. Joe brand. This is the 4th year that they've done this, and this year's theme is Eco Warriors, yay! Which I love, Eco Warriors. It's one of those ideas that came up in the later years of G.I. Joe during the DiC era of animation, and where G.I. Joe was trying to throw everything at the wall to see what stuck. And at the time, I believe Captain Planet was going on. And
that's right.
From what I understand, Hasbro was mining these nuggets from all these properties, Dino Hunters from Jurassic Park, Mega Marines from like Captain Powers and maybe the Terminator, all these creatures, the aliens, Lobotomax and them from maybe Aliens and Predator, and all these different things from different elements of pop culture. Superheroes, the Super Trooper from the superheroes that were going up. And so Eco Warriors is one of these themes that came about like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Do you want me to sort of clear up any misconceptions?
Sure.
Okay. I have to tell you, I get a big kick out of you saying we were throwing everything against the wall, because it actually was a strategy, but I can understand from the consumer's end, it was very different from what we had been doing before. So, and let me explain, there was a reason why. So G.I. Joe, since, its inception in the 60s, had started off as, military figure, right? But when that had been, pretty much exhausted, then they went on to try other things, right? Because kids change. They're not really brand loyalists. They try a lot of different things.
Right.
And you need to be, you need to be new and relevant to them as best you can. So when I joined the G.I. Joe team, which was like in 1990, I'd already been at Hasbro, like a year and a half. And the brand was on decline. And it had been on decline since its peak in 86. And like, anybody, you want to try to turn that around. You want to try to make it happen. But what we were noticing over, since 82 was that there was almost an exponential increase in the number of action figure lines being introduced. And it used to be there was only like a handful, and so they dominated, right?
Yep.
And then as there became, easier access to TV with cable. So before it was only network TV, so you had 3 channels.
Yep.
And then it was cable and you had almost an infinite number. All of a sudden there was places to have this animation and people to watch it. And that created a lot of competition for GI Joe. And my feeling was that as I was looking at it in analyzing it to a certain extent, it was all based on some kind of military aspect. Okay. And as the brand, manager on GI Joe, I was like, I'll be damned that we're going to let this you know, just happen to us. So we're going to compete with every one of them. So we came up with a strategy that, because you can't do everything all at once, right?
Right.
So we came up with a strategy that, 2 to 3 times a year, tied in when retailers reset their shelves, but it's usually twice. Sometimes it's 3 times. We would have a new segment that we would introduce, and if we did our job, the segment would last more than a year, and it would grow the space. And we did this because also our funding for the TV show had been cut by management. And so it's really hard to do, an action figure line without, a theatrical release or, a TV show or an animated series. So we used these segments as a way to add freshness into GI Joe. And then to tell that story, we created a live action advertising program because we were so sick and tired of hearing about there was going to be a GI Joe movie from, management. And, I had a box of scripts that just never went anywhere, right? And we were tired of that. So we decided with our ad agency, okay, well, let's just try to make the movie using the toys that we're going to be doing for the year and using the commercials as, different trailers for that movie. And that's kind of how that gets started. So as we started to look around who our competition was and choosing what themes, we did a combination of, our own research of, what were the biggest brands, what were creating, the biggest fervor and the biggest threat, but also testing our ideas with kids to make sure that we were picking the best, each year to do it. So this was combined with Kirk coming back into GI Joe, and he brought me in after that, and we had long discussions about what could we do, what what limitations might we have, and what might we not have. And as we started to talk about that, we started to realize that this sort of segmentation strategy, I called it, was a really good way to be able to basically punch up the excitement in GI Joe by doing things that would be very different, but if we did our job right, could still live in that universe. And we started with just adding toy features, so Sonic Fighters and Supersonic Fighters. That was strictly based on, we never had electronics before. We never had them in figures before. Somebody had come out with a 3 3/4 inch figure that had a backpack that talked, and we wanted to do that same kind of thing, but in our own way. So we started with that, and then eventually we got to look at a variety of concepts, and one of the concepts had been that there was a big movement towards recycling and the ecology, and Captain Planet really dominated that. And Tiger Electronics was really doing the action figures, and they were doing a great job with that. So we didn't want to come up with a superhero. We wanted to come up with our own, way to do ecology. And so between the design guys and the agency afterwards, they came up with the story of how these could exist, and why this is important, and why this is sort of near and dear to my heart is because I was made the head bad guy of Eco Warriors for Cobra, which was Cesspool. And it's got my name and where I grew up on the back of it. And yes, I posed for that picture to get illustrated. And they did the sculpting of me with this big jagged, thing that crossed my eye. But it was an honor, honestly, to be, to be asked if you wanted to be a figure. It didn't, you would never get it if you asked to do it. Okay. You had to, they had to come to you and ask you if you wanted to do it. And then the second thing is you couldn't do it unless you were, working on the line. So that segment did very, very well for us, and it lasted 2 years. We had plans for a third year, but in the toy industry, you have to kind of work almost 2 years in advance. So we had things that we did that just never saw the light of day, and that goes with a lot of these things. That there's things that when Dan has devoted several talks to bringing us together, talking about these drawings of things that never saw the light of day. And the funniest part of these meetings is looking at the faces of the designers, looking at their illustration because it's got their name on it, and they don't remember it at all. And so the rest of us are trying to kind of help them, like, okay, well, did we do it because of this? And maybe we were thinking this. But Eco Warriors was really kind of our first attempt at doing other kinds of features within GI Joe, and using color change was a big part of it, and because it was so new, because color change was so new to us. I mean, Mattel had been doing it for years in Hot Wheels, but it was new to us. Okay. We were getting the packaging ready and all, months and months in advance of production. And once we got into production, packaging's all done, right? It's made. We realized that the dramatic effect that we had seen in like some early tests wasn't really there that way in the end. And so we had to change all the packaging. And I think we put stickers on it first, and then we changed the actual, the films on it. But and it was because we could be accused of falsely advertising, showing, this dramatic effect when on the TV commercial, it was you could see it, but it wasn't that dramatic, in that, that was a learning, as we went through, of make sure that the features that we're planning on putting in, we're testing all the way through, and we make sure that we don't release any packaging until we're really, really sure it's going to perform the way that it needs to perform, in the, in real life.
Well, there's a couple of things in that I want to touch on.
Sure.
I work on the other side of the toy industry. I work in the retail side, and I've worked in the toy department for Walmart for decades. And so I'm very familiar with the transition of the layouts every 6 months. It's usually the end of January, beginning of February for the spring and summer toys, and then the end of July, beginning of August for the Christmas. It's gotten a little bit murky nowadays because of COVID kind of shifted everything.
Yeah.
All the stuff was behind, and there was trailers and blah, blah, blah. And it was a whole big mess for like 4 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember a lot of these type transitions and what companies do. And G.I. Joe wasn't in the market for God knows how many years at Walmart. But I do remember, though, Tomy had John Deere tractors in their segment. There used to be just one or two. Then all of a sudden, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. It was like, now I think they got 10 or whatever items in different spots.
Right.
So you've grown your Tomy John Deere tractor brand quite a bit. So I wanted to get that in there, that you are the head chief brand and commercial officer at Tomy Company.
Yes. I'm this will be the first place that I announce it, but I am no longer at Tomy. I left there a month ago, and I'm starting a new role in the toy industry at the beginning of June, which I cannot say where it is yet because it needs to get announced first. But I will be in the toy industry still, but in a different company in a different way.
Oh man. Now I got to figure out what that is. Is it something? Is it something that's represented behind me? Maybe.
No, not at all.
Oh,
Not
rats.
at all.
Okay. Well, I wish you all the best of luck
Thanks.
on that, and I wanted to make sure I brought up that Tomy piece for us.
Yes. No, that's great. So do you still work at Walmart?
Yep. Still
Oh,
in the
great
still
store.
manager. Florida here, and it's called Altamont Springs, but
Okay.
so, but yeah, I love
It's
toys, and it's just the right
great
department for
company.
me. Well, global company, not everybody cares for it, but I've enjoyed a good career with the company and have been successful over 20 years
Yeah.
or so. And not everybody understands the toy industry, and a lot of people will not go to the be a manager over the toy department because they just don't get it. And
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about myself. I get it, obviously, and I've been very successful and knowledgeable about it, and I enjoy doing it. And I can't really say on here, but it has its perks. I'll just say that
Yeah.
it has its perks.
Okay. Good.
The fans will probably be able to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But where was I going with? Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to mention was that the Eco Warriors, unfortunately, they had for a while. I think it's kind of turning around towards the positive, but for a negative, had a negative connotation due to the hot colors and all these things like that. And I don't understand why that is, because I thought they were fantastic at the time.
Yeah.
I thought it was a brilliant, logical step for the brand for that type of idea. All these different types of things that you guys were branching out, Star
Yeah.
Brigade, Ninja Force. You had the characters. You can't just make them stagnant. They have to be able to contribute to something to this. The
Yeah.
DEF and Shockwave and Bulletproof and all. It made sense that these characters would branch out because they were experts in certain fields. Now you
Right.
had Airtight that was an expert in that field, but you didn't ever use him, which is
Right.
weird. That you put Flint as the leader of the Eco Warriors, and I thought, why is Flint the leader? It should be Airtight. I never could figure that one out. So
So
there's a question for you.
there's a big reason for that. Okay. So the modus operandi for every marketing person that was on GI Joe, okay, was that they wanted to create new characters in new vehicles, always new.
Right.
Okay. So early on in my tenure on GI Joe, I had a conversation with Larry Hama, who writes the comic books, and he's like, and I'm taking him through. I'm just doing what everybody else did. I'm taking him through. What's the New Year's line going to be, and here's the characters, and then here's the vehicles, and you have to remember, GI Joe, in the '80s and early '90s, was really a vehicle line.
Right.
It wasn't a figure line.
It's never
It
intended.
was it was a vehicle line. So if you look at Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
The reason they made it 3 3/4 inch size is so they could do the ships. That's why. And we followed that format. And so along with that, we followed it with all these, huge and grandiose vehicles that we created, right? But in the 90s, that was changing. All of that storytelling with the animation and the movies and all the rest was making the figures more important. And as a result of that, Larry put the bug in our ear of, it's really a pain for me to have to try to write this book with 400 characters. Like, can't we whittle it down? And he tried this before, but everybody wanted just new, right? So I took the opposite approach. So we did a lot of characters over again that we had done before because I thought, they were the most popular ones, and they had some somewhat leadership roles to them, and we needed that as part of the storytelling. So when we came down to Eco Warriors, I didn't know all the names of all the I still don't know all the names of all the characters, right? So as what I'm working with the designers, they're drawing up the characters. And sometimes they have a character in mind, that they want to do, and other times, they don't, and we talk about it. And I was under this modus operandi myself of, if we're going to do another assortment, there better be a lead guy in there that we can make important, so we can build him up or her up, because we did other versions of Scarlet too. As we built that. So that's the reason why Airtight was probably, the best choice, right? If you had somebody that was a fan that was on it, but I was still new, to all of that. So
you're claiming ignorance is the excuse.
I'm claiming. No, I'm not I'm not claiming ignorance. I'm claiming I was still onboarding
I gotcha. I gotcha.
at the time.
I'm just curious.
And what did Larry do? So what Larry did, right, after I gave him free reign, was he writes this story with the Star Viper that mows everybody down. He was so happy. He was so happy.
And he was. Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. And but that's the thing though. He did include Ecor in the comic book. And there was a really gruesome story that he used where this kid gets all mauled up in the Cesspool's origin. I think he tells Cesspool's origin. He was a businessman and stuff like that. But yeah, it's puzzled me for decades.
What's really funny about the Cesspool character was the design guys really were thinking through the costumes of how they were, and the backstory for Cesspool was that he was an executive,
right,
and that sort of grew up within the lumber industry, and he had these things on his ankles where those spikes that you use to climb a tree, right? And that was why he had a chainsaw and all those other sort of accessories in design cues. And then we used as much of that as we could, but his backstory is also a little bit reminiscent of the Joker too.
Yeah.
Which we borrow from the best.
So let's see. Let's get a little bit into a bit of your history here. So you did an undergraduate thesis in graphic design, I believe, at the Massachusetts Art and Design School.
Yes. So I coming out of high school, I wanted to be a graphic designer. So I went to BU, Boston University, for 2 years, and really didn't like it because it was all focused on classical art of sculpting and drawing and oil painting. And those are all fundamentals that, you should have. But I wasn't going to get to any graphic design work till the second semester of my junior year. That means I would only be doing it a year and a half out of 4 years. And that bothered me. So I took a summer course at Mass College of Art and Design in computer graphics, and I loved it. And so I convinced my parents to switch. And listen, paying for tuition at BU versus a state school like Matt, it was not even a challenge. It was easy, but I didn't read the fine print. So here I am. I'm applying, right, to Mass College of Art, and they accepted me, but they were going to make me take my sophomore year over again because they didn't accept the curriculum at BU at its face value. And I was not happy about that.
I bet.
Okay. So I fought tooth and nail to have them review me at the midway point and then put me into the junior class. Okay. So I do all this work and I'm showing and they told me my stuff was good. And look, you're right up the, you're right at the top with your other top peers in your class. And I said, well, okay, then let me go over. Let me move me over to the junior year. And this is where I completely missed it because they knew how this was going to end before I even started with it. And they said, well, we'd love to, but you missed the first half of the year. So you would be at a disadvantage going into the second half without all the learning from the first half. And I'm like, God
damn, that is.
But so that got me determined. And when I finally did get to my junior year, you had to come up with a thesis project for that would be an overlay for your junior and senior year. I chose transforming robots because I never thought I would work in the toy industry. I just liked toys. I had younger cousins that were all into Transformers, and I found it fascinating. And then it turned into this whole market analysis of all the different companies and how they told their stories and what's the difference between Bandai's Godican Force and Transformers that was developed by Takara and brought all the stuff that an art student might not normally like dig into, but for some reason it worked. And when I did my final presentation, I had done my own product line. I did this whole analysis. I did it in their theater, which had a 3-story tall screen because it was like an amphitheater, and they awarded me honors on the spot, which they hadn't done before.
Wow.
So that made up for doing the sophomore year over again. So
all the hard work paid
squared
off.
Well, it did.
Congratulations. But that has to be one of the coolest things to do a thesis on transforming robots. And like transforming robots at the time in the early 80s was the thing.
Right.
Everybody was trying to figure out how can we get into this market, even Hasbro.
Right. Yeah. What was really funny, and I find this throughout my career, is a lot of people love toys. They may not all outwardly show it.
Closeted toy collectors.
I have not run into anybody that doesn't think it's cool or doesn't think it's fun. And I think that the reason for that, and I've had this feeling in a number of projects that I did, and it kind of came to fruition when we launched our first 12-inch version of Duke, was that adults, when they have kids, want to share and relive the best of their childhood memories with their kids.
Yeah.
And the feeling that I had about G.I. Joe and about creating that 12-inch scale was that it would bring dads into the brand that really hadn't been in it before, because it's something that they would recognize.
Right.
And that worked.
For that period. For that period, I think you were right on the money. The Hall of Fame and the Masterpiece series, God, that went for 20 years or something. I don't know when that ended, but it went forever. And they did every single thing you could possibly ever imagine in that Masterpiece, all that stuff. Gosh.
Yeah, I had so much fun on that because I got to do whatever, all the toys that I had when I was a kid and all the ones I wanted and I didn't get were the things that we focused on. And it was a lot of fun to do. And the reception that people gave us was just, fantastic. And here's the interesting thing. When you talk to either 12-inch collectors or 3 3/4-inch collectors, right? You see what I just did? I put them into 2 buckets, right?
Right.
In reality, when we did Hall of Fame, it raised everything up.
Yeah.
Because they were the same characters in the story. And it didn't matter what size they were in.
Yes.
Because again, kids are not brand loyalists.
No.
Okay? They're going to play just like Andy played in Toy Story. With anything. So that was a really important thing I learned, working on G.I. Joe.
I don't know, being a collector that's 50 years old, that's collected G.I. Joe since I was like 8. I don't know about that brand loyal situation. Maybe I don't know.
Some people are, and certainly if you're a collector, you're a brand loyalist, right?
Yeah.
But little kids at that age normally, or usually,
Yeah.
are trying a lot of different things.
Right. You're right. You're right. I was just pulling your leg on that. But yeah, because I know a lot of people like me. But
Yeah.
you're right, because I deal with that on a day-to-day basis in my other career at Walmart. You see the Rugrats running up and down the aisles, pulling stuff off the shelf. Mommy, I want a Spider. No, mommy, I want a Batman. No, mommy, I want a Lego. No, mommy, I want a blah, blah, blah. I'm like, make up your mind, kid. You've got the rest of your life ahead of you, please. But they don't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
The kids don't know. I've been dealing with it for God knows how many years. But you guys have in the toy industry trying to psychoanalyze these type of things. And I've spoken with Daryl DePriest, who's a literal scientist, and they couldn't figure out then more than you guys could figure out then. You tried your best,
Yeah.
and you hit on something for quite a while. Hasbro hit on it for quite a while. It did good, and it was moved some units. But then it get to the point that group that was 8, 9, 10 moved on, and then
Right.
you had to get the next 8, 9, 10-year-olds or whatever it is, 5, 6-year-olds.
Right.
And then what was popular for those is not the same that was popular for the first 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. So it's a difficult thing.
It is. I mean, in the industry has evolved as technology has evolved. So, we used to really consider, the toy, action figures going to 12 years old. We're lucky that it goes to 7 now.
Yeah. No.
Because after that, they aren't interested in that. There's too much content that they can see and stories that they're interested in and things that come to life in all the screens that permeate their world, right?
Yeah.
That's what, grooves on them. But we also see that there's a growing number of collectors, older people that are adults that
And
not
newer
just want to
people.
relive their childhood, they want to go back to it and pick up where they left off.
Right. And newer people that were teenagers and went to college and got married, and now they're 20 something are like, wait a minute, I sold all my comics, I sold all my toys, I'm getting back into. I see it in a lot of the groups that I frequent that they're, and I was a person that came into the community about 15 years ago, and I didn't know that this community was like this at that point in like 2010. But as I've gone on, I've seen like every 5 years, there's more people from 15 years prior, or then 2020, 15 years prior to that, and now 2024, 15 years prior to that. And so there's people now asking for the new sculpt era, which I never thought I'd be seeing fans wondering about the new sculpt era, because I thought everybody hated the new sculpt era, just like I thought everybody hated the all the weird bright colors. But now nowadays you see a lot of people like, no, we love Eco Wars, we love Ninja Force, we love all this stuff that the 90s had, but it had a bad connotation there for a little while because that audience hadn't got to the point where they were going back and getting it yet. So it's
because there's never really a line, right? It's always kind of blurred and it moves. So there's people that are still in it as you're moving past them, but that's natural with anything. The bright color comment, a lot of that had to do with what fashion was doing at the time. There was a lot of bright colors and neons, being used. And when you looked at the G.I. Joe figures that, we traditionally had done in, the early 80s, and you put them up against what was now in Ninja Turtles and what was in Captain Planet and what was in He-Man, those were all bigger figures, number one, but also, brighter in a lot of different ways. We looked like, dull next to that.
Right.
And so we had to find, and I think it was a good solution. What did I love the fact that we did all of those weapon, sprues in bright colors? Nah, we probably should have thought that one through and maybe done them in, different colors and not reuse them so many times. The reason we did that was because costs were going up on figures, and we really dreaded having to go above $1.99 retail. Now think about that for a second, right?
Yeah.
GI Joe was $1.99 retail for a 3 3/4 inch figure, and we sweated it when we were getting costs that were pushing us to go above $1.99, and we tried for the longest time to get, basically to share the pain with our retailers, right? We would take a little bit less margin if they took a little bit less in order to preserve the price point. But it's and along that way, as we're diving into the costs and really working with our vendors, we found out that if we had three separate weapons, that didn't work, just three separate weapons, it would cost us the same as doing one of those trees that had 10 weapons on it. And so we looked at that as, okay, well, that's a value that we can bring to help avoid having to raise prices. We'll do this instead. But we did as somebody pointed out to me recently, in that year of like 1993, we came out with a grundle of product, which is a lot of product.
It was. I think that's the largest amount of, I would say, figures in a year was that year.
Yeah. And that's because we all felt that the tide was changing, that action figures were not about vehicles as the primary purchase anymore. It was about figures in storytelling.
It's true. Because how many damn Batman versions did they put out? Like 1 million Batmans. Exactly. Same Batman with a different scheme. Oh, it's Arctic Batman. It's Polar Batman. It's ice skating Batman. Give me a break.
And you know what? Kids gobbled it all up. Because they just liked the colors and the design and the features. And it's not a lot. It's not much more difficult than that. But when you're trying to come up with a line that's quasi-realistic, like G.I. Joe, we had nobody in there that had any superpowers, right? It was a way for us to experiment, in sort of a different universe.
And I like the realism, but I do like. I thought it was interesting. I like fantasy. I don't know. I like the realism, but I like how G.I. Joe was described in the very beginning, that it was just beyond futuristic, like just beyond the future. And I like that. That was my thing. I was like, no, it's just beyond. You're not going to get these people going and fighting dinosaurs. You're not going to get these guys. They're going to be fighting dinosaurs, but it's just that step above, same with Eco Warriors, same with Mega Marine, same with Star Brigade. It was just that step farther. I can see, but we're in 2024 and we're not fighting people in space yet, which I'm disappointed at. Go ahead. Go
ahead. No, I wasn't going to say anything. No.
After your thesis, you ended up getting work, or you're getting hired for Monogram Revel Model Kits division in Chicago, and I believe this is where the original G.I. Joe team pulled a lot of parts and things were from Revel models and Monogram models to build their preliminary vehicles, the jets and all this stuff. So it's funny that you worked for the company that they stole stuff to make their toys, to launch their toy brand. I find that a weird, fascinating, like retro thing.
It is very common. And even in Hollywood, when they're building models, they are pulling from Revell and Monogram and Tamiya kits. And just a funny side story. I injured my elbow, tore the tendons in it back in November. So I've been working from home for like 6 months, and I need something else to do. So it was suggested by a friend of mine that I get a hobby, and I've really never had a hobby except building model kits when I was a kid. So I started looking around, and I wanted model kits of vehicles, space vehicles, things that I see in movies. So I find this model kit. It's called the Con Am Shuttle, and it's from Sean Connery's science fiction movie Outland. Okay, so I get it. I'm putting it together, and I'm reading the story about how it came to be, and they talk about that they use parts from not only model kits but other toys, and they mention the Millennium Falcon, and then I'm looking at this thing, and on the top of it, there is that round panel that Luke and Han shoot out of with those laser guns.
Right.
It's right on the top of the. They didn't even disguise it. It's right there, as is, and I got the biggest hoot out of that.
Yeah. That's funny. But I just thought that was so interesting when I found that out. I did some
Yeah,
research. I was like, wait a minute. He worked for the company that was stealing from him. He ended up
yeah.
working for the other company after the fact. I wonder if Kirk and them, like, wait a minute, we stole from you. I guess we owe you a job here.
Well, when I worked there, I did not work on model kits. There was a very small toy line, and it was a side thing, and I went to work on that stuff.
Oh, okay. um, so yeah, so you talked about 12 scale. That was your baby, your proudest moment in your toy career, right? Uh,
Well, I've been very fortunate to have several proud moments, but for you know at that time, that had the biggest impact that that had worked on. I mean, it it was a good thing to try. We did it with Target because they actually suggested it
right.
after we tried so many times to get it through management. In fact, the day before, our president had almost told me, you got to stop. Just you got to, you're driving me crazy. 7 times I've been looking at this thing. We're not doing it. It's a distraction. The next day, Target asked about it, and then all of a sudden, he's interested because it's a potential sale. And then when they bought into it, we were going to do Duke and Cobra Commander. And then our president, a few months down the road, starts to get cold feet and was going to kill the whole project. So I found out about it and called ahead to Target headquarters and talked to the buyer and the divisional manager, along with our salesperson, and they ambushed the president when he walked in. And then I got a call an hour later, and from him saying, "Did you call down here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because you're wrong, and I can't let you do that." He goes, "Vinny," he goes, "for God's sake, can we just do one? Can we just do one?" I'm like, "All right, we'll just do Duke." And then, when we finally launched it, we had shipped we thought it was going to be good. We shipped them 20,000 units, and we thought that would carry them, from June, which was when Father's Day was, back until the fall, till October. It sold out in 3 hours, and they had to write all these um, rain checks, which they don't do anymore because of this.
Yeah.
And then Target worked with our sales team, and under their cost, they air freighted in another 20 to 40,000 units. And by
Wow.
the end of the year, we had done over 120,000 of just Duke.
So did you
Yeah.
walk into that guy's office with a smile on your face and show him these numbers? And he was like, well, I guess I was wrong.
He couldn't have been more supportive,
Great.
and admitted that he didn't see it. Okay, he would never say he was wrong. He said he didn't see it. However, not everybody in the company thought it was good, including our CEO,
Oh,
Alan Hassenfeld. And it was because at the time, he was the CEO, right? He was new to that role,
right.
and he had all the divisional presidents. There was 3 of them that reported into him, and he had an agreement with them that, like, he wanted to know what we were working on, all the product lines. But when it came down to retailer exclusives, he just didn't. He didn't. It would be too much. He didn't need to know that. It's just the mainline things. And when he didn't know we were doing that because it was an exclusive.
Right.
And so when it came out, I brought one to his office to give him one into some of the other senior executives. And when we had a line review, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, GI Joe always went last. And so we got up there and we showed this whole line of 12-inch figures in the Rhino Jeep and the accessories that we were going to do for the following year. And he didn't say anything. And usually he was really excited about product. He was very quiet and glaring at me the whole GI Joe presentation. And when it got done, everybody starts to file out of the theater that we had. And they're filing out, they're going home. And he says, he's still sitting there. And he starts talking to me, and then it turned into yelling at me.
Oh,
and then he brought Kirk in, and I'm like, I didn't even know what to say, because I thought it was great, and later on that day, our president came to find me, and I'm in a group with all my other counterparts, and we're talking about, there's always the meeting after the meeting. So we had the line review meeting. Now there's the meeting to determine, okay, what are we really going to do? And he pulls me out of that meeting, basically, telling me that not to listen to what was said to me, that, that what I did was, astounding. And he was very clear to say it wasn't me that did it. It was our team that did it, because this was created before I even got there. They just never had a partnership that could put it all together. And even when we did that, I still couldn't get it through. It was really Target in the mix
right.
that made all that happen, right? So it was a team effort altogether. But the next, he said, he was very mad at the CEO, and they had it out.
Oh, no.
And they had it out before he came to find me. And he said, tomorrow morning, 9:00, you're coming to his office, and we're going to talk to him, and he's going to apologize to you, and then you're going to listen to what he has to say. And what he had to say was very much, true if you had grown up with it in the company like he did. We changed the face of GI Joe, to look like the character Duke.
Right.
But in that scale, he really felt like it needed to remain sort of like anybody, like could be anybody.
Gotcha.
And so we changed the head sculpt on
Oh,
that.
because his father was the one that was the one responsible for the original GI Joe, and then his other son was the one that brought 3 3/4 back and had
That's
to
right.
go to his father's grave and tell him we're going to bring GI Joe back. So that thing with this family is one of the most critical things of their lives. What
Right.
are we going to? How do they respond to something like that? I can't imagine.
Yeah. So one one of the things I was really worried about at the time that he was going to yell at me about was that when we did that original package, I wanted to juxtapose a photograph of an original GI Joe against the new one, just to show, we were honoring the same kinds of things. And action figure collecting wasn't that big of a deal back when we did this.
Yeah.
So I knew where there was a set. It was in Alan's office, because it was his dad's set.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it was behind glass cases. So I waited till Alan was out of the country, and I talked his secretary into letting me come in with a photographer, photographer from our company.
Right.
And we lifted the glass case off of it and took the photograph and then put it back in place.
Oh my God. You must have really had one of those daredevil personalities when you were young.
It wasn't so much daredevil, but I had this vision, right? And we were working together with the design team. and they had this vision. And like when you can see it in your mind,
Right.
it's an incredible motivator to deliver it.
Figure it out. Yeah.
And you find you do things, not illegal things, not immoral things, but you do
No.
things that you may not have been, you may not have been comfortable with doing before. I had a mentor at another company later on. When he left the company, he sent out a note to everybody, and he quoted, I think it was Winston Churchill, and he said, sometimes it's not enough to do your best. Sometimes you have to do what's required.
Right.
And that really stuck with me through my career, which is sometimes it takes more than what you think you can do. To get to reach down deep and do it.
Right. Wow. Well, I applaud you for that situation. I don't know if I would have did that because I run into that type of thing a lot, and people don't want to rock the boat. They're afraid they're going to lose their job or their livelihood for their family, and I understand that. But when things are not the way that they're supposed to be, and things don't wash out properly, kosher wise, like honesty or whatever, sometimes you got to rock the boat. You can't just let people like treat you a certain way or treat you disrespectfully. You got to sometimes stand up for yourself and stand up for your values and what you bring to a situation, your skills and things. You can't just let people do that.
Right.
I don't know if that's from my Massachusetts background, from being a northerner, New Englander, that we didn't let bosses boss us around.
No.
And I got that a little bit from my father. Maybe that's why he traveled so much around getting new jobs, because he stood up for himself too much. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be too. I mean, change and innovation don't come from the status quo. Never does.
Exactly.
So it's you have to rock that. Now, let's bring this back to 3 3/4 inch, right? So I had a similar thing happen on when Jurassic Park came out.
Oh boy.
So
Why
I
didn't
was going to be
Hasbro get that license? That's one of the another puzzling things is you guys had that in-house. They came to you, here's Jurassic Park, and you didn't get it.
Because back in that time, right? Kenner tended to do more things that had a theatrical component to it. They did Robin Hood, they did Aliens, they did Predator,
Okay.
they did Batman. That was all theatrical based, right? Originally.
Yep.
Hasbro tended to do animated shows. And so when it came to us, we always tended to look at movies as, well, it's only going to be here for 6 weeks.
Right.
And how much markdown do we have to pay for it? Kenner, on the other hand, took the thing of, okay, well, yeah, the movie's going to be here. It's going to be big. And then there's going to be other things that are going to come. And so we'll just create our, different newness in those years between the theatricals, and we'll keep it alive that way. So it's just different kind of philosophies about that. And that's why, Jurassic Park, ended up with Kenner, and they did a great job with it. But I was going to be damned to let, a dinosaur thing go out there, and we weren't going to have a piece of that. So easiest thing to do, find me a dinosaur in China from somebody, okay? And make it be a T-Rex.
Oh, it was
And
terrible.
we got the rest of it, right? Okay.
It was lame. It was bad.
And so it was not that way. It was not that way. So we send we send the team in China to go find, and there's got to be 12 million versions of T-Rexes out there, right? So there was a cost component to it, and there was a size component to it. And they came back with, pretty decent looking T-Rex. So we're going down the road of using that, and Hasbro's in many toy companies, safety standards go a fair amount above the U.S. requirement. Okay,
That's
because
good.
they just want to be sure.
Yeah.
So the T-Rex with the little these little hands in front of him, they could potentially, if you bid on it and pulled, you could take it off. And if that happened, that would cause it to be a small part. Okay. Now, if it's age graded, 3 and up, then that small part thing doesn't apply. And GI Joe was I think it was originally 4 and up, and then we made it 3 and up, but it was at least 4 and up. So we cleared that. But our quality department always got to push it, and make things look like maybe they're a little bit more threatening than they really are.
You can beat your brother over the head with this rubber dinosaur.
Yeah. So they basically said I couldn't use it, and I had to find another dinosaur. Now we're under the gun. I wanted this to launch with KB Toys when the movie came out. Okay, and that's who was going to take it. And we had to print the packaging in advance, and this comes late in the game. And now I'm faced with either we choose a new dinosaur, which forces us to change all the packaging, which means we blow the date.
Wow.
Or we use the new dinosaur, I don't change the packaging, and I claim that its product and colors may vary, which is on the back of all the boxes that we do, right?
Disclaimers.
And it was still a 2-legged upright dinosaur. It did not look like a T-Rex per se. But if you went like this, it kind of did. So I'm ready to go with, hey, product and colors may vary. And I'm charging down the line, giving direction. And the head of quality didn't like that. And so he goes to the COO, who is Al Varecchia, who later became the CEO and eventually became the chairman, and then he retired. And Al, not that I saw him a lot, but when I did, we got along, and he called me to his office, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And I didn't know what it was about. As soon as I walked in the door and I see the head of quality sitting down, I'm like, I was ready to launch into, a bunch of curse words. So I sit down and he goes, all right, explain your story. So I explained the story, right? And I explained the timeliness, the time constraints under it. And also the fact that, we didn't get any feedback from quality till, late in the game. And then he asks the quality guy to tell his story, right? And he just says, the arms pull off, it's small parts. Do you want to deal with it or don't you? So they didn't want to deal with the small parts. And he said, if this was another time, I might just consider going with your product and colors may vary story. But I just signed a fine of something like, $1.5 million because, they were accused of slack packing, which means there's a little toy in a big box. Okay. And he wasn't about to now go against the agreement he signed with the FTC, which is he wouldn't do it again. And us not having the right dinosaur in the package, that would be risking it. So I basically went and redid it. I redid the packaging. It was late. KB didn't want it anyway because it wasn't a low enough price for them, and I ended up doing it with Toys R Us, and they did very well with it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Another thing like the Eco Warriors that has come back, and I have to credit my friend a little bit. He has this weird thing where he takes rare products from the day and he upgrades them in his way on his videos and his social media, and he grades them and gets them put into these plexiglass, and he talks about the limitation in the numbers and blah blah. Somehow a lot of that Hasbro information has been put out and he can look at the numbers and he upgrades it. Now there's a huge thing where now that Dino Hunter set, if you really want a mint grade, it goes for like $2,600. It's like the worst, rubberest, stupidest dinosaur ever. And we found some copies of that dinosaur from China. We found this is the dinosaur they use. Here it is. We've got copies of.
Oh, I missed one crucial thing, which will make this even worse. So after I agree, okay, to take the other dinosaur, okay, the quality team feels bad because they've put us through this, and they said, well, what if we just tool a new dinosaur that looks like your original one, but just the legs will be molded as part of the body instead of sticking out. And I said, where were you guys 6 months ago? We did this whole thing so we didn't have to tool a dinosaur. Now you tell me it's not a big deal. No, it's a couple of $1,000. I'm like, oh, okay. So we ended up, after all of that, we didn't use the source dinosaur at all. We tooled one up that looked like a source dinosaur.
So that rubber one you guys made.
We tooled it up.
And it was exactly like I said, that one from China, that rubber dinosaur. We found the
except
copy of it.
Except that hands are molded as part of the body.
Except it's like that. That's what I did this earlier. Like, oh my God, that's incredible. Oh God, it's just the whole thing, that whole Dino Hunter set thing. I love it. I have it. It's just a pain in the BS. It really.
I'll tell you, there are lots of stories like that about how things happen. The one that really bothers me the most is when I moved over to Hasbro Direct, we got approached by Toys R Us after the company decided to move G.I. Joe to Kenner in Cincinnati, and then G.I. Joe Extreme failed.
Yeah.
So Toys R Us laying in wait on that and said, we really want the 3 3/4 inch line back. And, we want Vinnie to work on it because he knows us and knows line.
I know exactly where you're going with this story.
Okay. So do you want to tell it?
I don't know it, but I know what you're getting. I know the punchline. I know the punchline of this storyline. And that's another one of those stupid dinosaur situations where the thing is like $1 gazillion.
It's worse. It's worse. So we start working on this. Now, the thing to understand about all these products that Hasbro makes, including G.I. Joe, is they're not going into some closet for you to come back some year and pick it out and run it. These things have a life cycle, and if you don't use them, they're not taken care of well, or they're in a part of the world where temperate climate is not conducive, they will corrode and they'll rust. Right. So what Hasbro does is, once the U.S. is done with it, it goes up for grabs with other countries to use it, right? So that's why things move around. And usually the last, usage of them is in India.
Oh.
At least back in when I was there. So we wanted to recreate G.I. Joe from scratch. We couldn't get all the figures. They just didn't exist anymore. So we had to start picking figures from different years to put together the characters that we wanted. So we couldn't get the original Destro. So we got the Destro. They had the big red collar around it, right? Okay. So one of the guys that was working in Hasbro Direct had somebody that was, we would farm out a lot of work to get done, so we farmed the figures to be painted for Paint Masters out to some friend of his, and the friend of his, as a joke, paints Destro to look like with the fur coat, look like a pimp, right? And it was a joke, and by mistake it got into the box that went to China with the Paint Masters. Wasn't planned. It was by accident.
Wow.
So what's the China team do? They take it, okay, they go make it, and usually they do a small production run of 300 units or so, and then these things come back, And the designers in the team thought it was the funniest damn thing in the world. Okay,
I bet.
and it was funny as a mistake. Okay, it was funny as a mistake. But like anything else, some got out,
Of
right?
course.
Then these legends go, get made up. They're made up. Okay, they're not true. They get made
That's
up, and then they start, people start trading them, and they think this is some value in these astronomical and honestly silly numbers start to get applied to them. Okay, so years ago, we at the time it was like, oh, it's funny, haha. Send the right one over there. Let's go. But years later, okay, this thing has a life of its own. And some of the, and I can understand how it happens, right? New brand manager gets on GI Joe. GI Joe hasn't been around. They're like, we got to do something. It's a big collector community. Let me go out and let me do, a survey. And Pimp Daddy Destro comes ranked really high because of its price. So somebody thinks that that's good, that they think that's of value. And so what do? They do a classified series. They tooled this, okay? They tooled it from scratch, a 6-inch version, and then they farm out the design to the licensee that's doing the sculptures and does the sculpture of it. This is not in, as they say, canon. It's not part of the storyline. It never was part of the storyline.
They did
Why are you taking a mistake and just putting it up on a pedestal?
they did a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive about 2008 or 9 of that Destro as well. And I believe in the comics, there have been different comic artists that have interpreted that Destro in his like lair in Castle Destro, wearing like printed leopard bathrobes and this and that, and you can see leopards hanging from his walls and stuff, different things like that. So it's kind of because of an accident you've added to the lore that was never intended to be added to the lore. It's just one of those things that in pop culture that stuff happens.
Yeah,
It's
it,
astonishing.
it's like Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Not everything on Wikipedia is true.
Right. But that's why we have to do these interviews with people like yourself to get the information proper. That's why Dan's books are so successful in 15 volumes, because people want the truth. You can't handle the truth. We want the fake news.
The
Right?
truth is sometimes the truth is much weirder than any of the stories that people create in push on and pass on. And sometimes they're just not that exciting at all. It's just like when we talk about back to Eco Warriors, right?
Yeah.
Why did we have the dolphin painted black and white?
Oh, there's another rare thing.
Okay, so what happened again? Another miscommunication. So when we created, I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't Wetsuit. It was another one.
It was Deep Six.
Deep Six. So we created Deep Six, and we had all of these weapons that squirted water, right, to do the color change. And Kurt Groen came up with the idea of like, we've done figures with companion animals before. The most popular being Timber and Snake Eyes, right? So let's do a killer whale. So yeah, let's do this. So we did it. We costed it out. It was going to be okay. So we shipped this sculpture and the paint master to China at least a month before the line review. So it's going, okay? And we get up and present it, and Alan Hasselfeld says, "Ooh, that killer whale looks kind of scary. Why is he with a GI Joe? That seems like that's a mismatch. I think he should come with like a dolphin." Okay, listen, you get these comments all the time, okay? And there's ones you fight for, and there's ones you don't.
Right.
And in this one, we're like, okay, let's just make it a dolphin. So we do a new sculpt. Okay, we do the dolphin. It made it late. Okay, it was late. But we don't. For some reason, we sent the paint master, but it didn't convey. So they just took the dolphin. Oh, it's a new sculpt. Okay, got it. But it's still black and white. Yep. They painted black and white. That gets. I think it got out there in the assortments, right? Because somewhere along the line we missed that, and all of a sudden, somebody was telling me they paid $4,000 for this thing, and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
I don't know. I get the regular dolphin version. I can't afford the killer whale version. But that's the market. That's the community. What are you going to do? There's stuff out there. Dan gets a lot of this stuff too, and he does a lot of business for you guys and helps you guys out. But there's people that have the money to buy all this stuff. I don't have the money to buy it. I do have a complete run of 82 to 94 and every vehicle except for a couple of Night Force vehicles, but mines are loose. I don't even have them all in boxes. I can't afford mint in box.
Yeah. When I first moved here to Chicago, I had always wanted the shuttle complex.
Oh yeah.
But it was long out of production when I joined. But why it was important to me was that I remember, when I was working for Monogram in Revelle, I went to my first toy fair. And back in the day, these toy fairs, you would go in and they would just get groups of people together and then take you around. They don't do any of that stuff now. Now everything is secret. Okay. So I went into the Hasbro showroom, which was just immense. And we go into G.I. Joe and we see the shuttle complex there. And I'm like, I just thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
Awesome.
So I came out here. I had nothing to do. It was in the middle of COVID. And we have an office in Dyersville, Iowa, which is about four hours from here. And I was looking for this and I found a guy that was in Iowa. He was about an hour and a half from our office.
Wow.
And he had one that wasn't complete, right? But it was in good shape, okay? And for what he was asking for, it was pretty fair. So I drove all the way down there and I picked that thing up. and I brought it, bringing it back, and I had some padding in the back of my Jeep. And I realized when I got it home that if I ever rested this thing on its wheels, they're gonna snap off.
Yeah.
So then I call my buddy Dave Kunitz and asked him, like, I asked him about this, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that was engineering." Yeah. And I'm like, what? We wanted to do it a different way. They wanted to do it this way, and it was the worst thing that we could have done because that was the biggest complaint that they broke. Yep. I said, okay. So I'm just looking online for, can I get something to put it on? There was a guy out there that made specific 3D printed little mini, almost like jacks.
Right.
And they go in the middle and they fit right under and it gets it off those wheels.
Yeah.
But just about like a quarter of an inch. And I bought those, and that thing has been living its life since then. But I did learn my lesson. I was cleaning it.
Oh.
And I was holding one of the bay doors closed, and I'd taken the shuttle and the booster out of it. And as I'm cleaning it, I'm turning it around, right? And I forget that my hand is not on the second bay door. And as I turn it away from me, that door just snaps open and snaps right off the gantry. So I had to go find another door.
That's very brittle.
It's shattered.
Yeah.
It's because over time, that plastic loses the rubberizing factor in it that makes it solid, and it's like glass.
Yeah.
In fact, it's like pane glass.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. G.I. Joe vehicles were made like a model back in the day. They weren't the most sturdiest things. I've told this story a bunch of times where I had Ostrikers. I had probably a dozen Ostrikers over my childhood that I would just throw down the hill with my figures on it. And those Ostrikers just destroyed every friggin' one of them, just right down the mountain. I'm like, because they're made to be played with. This whole thing, like I'm doing,
Exactly.
it's not meant to be like this. I've got thousands of figures behind me. That was never the intention when you guys would do it. It was to get a kid to buy a toy, rip that package, play with that gimmick, whatever, play with it, put it in his bin. Maybe a year later, he might come back to it and have it fight Batman or something. You know, that was the intention. This was
Yeah.
not the intention.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
but I wanted to touch on one thing before I let you go. Is I'm a
Yeah.
huge comic book fan since childhood. Got my first GI Joe comic when I was about 8 years old. Issue 20, I think it was 23. Not issue 21, 23. It's the
Yeah.
origin of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and the death of the Silent Master. No, the death of the Hard Master, not the Silent Master.
Yeah.
So that was my first GI Joe comic, my first comic that I ever got in my life. And so I know you're a huge Captain America fan and you're a comic collector. And so I just wanted to bring that up and ask you about that and your love of Captain America.
So I I always liked Marvel comics for Captain America and the Avengers, and loved DC comics for Batman. And when I went to, and you know, and I had some around. I wasn't really collecting more than robots at one point in time, right? I've branched out to be broader with action figures and die-cast vehicles. That's kind of what I stay focused on. So I get to Mattel, and our head of PR does this like workshop with new senior executives that come in to, you know, help them understand how they communicate so that they can be more effective in sort of looking the part and playing the part, you know, of somebody that's going to give direction to, you know, a couple of hundred people and, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business. So she comes down and she does this whole like Myers-Briggs personality analysis on me. And as we're working on it, she's making all these notes. So she comes back 2 weeks later, because she was up in the Fisher Price office up in East Aurora, and I was in New York City. And she comes back and she puts together this dossier on me. And it's all based on, who do I sound like? What do I represent? And on her own, I never mentioned Captain America to her ever in any previous meetings. And she comes back and tells me that, you know, my personality traits in my communication style come back reflective of how Captain America is depicted and what his things are. And I thought that was so unbelievably just poignant at the time, that that's what I sound like, that's how I act, those kinds of things. So since then, you know, this got out to my family and my friends, and now I have a lot of Captain America stuff.
I bet.
And my hope is, my sister lives in a town in Massachusetts where Chris Evans grew up, and she's very close friends with his mother, because my nieces all went to the youth theater there, and you know, sang and acted and did all this kind of stuff. And at some point I said, you know, you just got, it's going to be better because I'm going to be moving back and I'm going to be closer there, so I can be there quick. But I said, if it ever happens
Like,
that you can get me in there, I'm going to bring my shield. Just got to sign it, and we'll be done. That's all I need from you, Martha. That's all I need. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm ready.
that's great. I think Captain America is a very interesting, unique character. I don't know you if you follow him in the comics or not, but I don't. I don't know if I would have picked Captain America as your archetype for you. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know. I would have picked. I went. Was in the cadet ranges when I was young, and there was a drill sergeant, and you remind me a lot of this guy that was a drill sergeant, more so than Captain America. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I tend I like to lead from the front.
Uh,
I don't I don't like being in the back and being a caretaker leader. I find that disingenuous and boring.
right.
Okay. Now sometimes I get so excited about being in the front, I think I'm supposed to be doing everything
Uh,
in the front. So I have to learn. I'm really supposed to be teaching people and bringing them along,
right.
and that's kind of my role, now. So I'm getting better at that. I got some work to do, but I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, because that makes sense that they thought you were Captain America, because that's what Captain America does. He's
Yeah,
always at the front. He's always the first guy to go. He's always the one
yeah,
to throw that shield first and stuff like that. So that kind of psychologically makes sense if that's the thing that they got
yeah,
out of you if you're that type of a person. That's interesting though.
yeah.
Very interesting.
And I'm very focused on telling the truth, no matter how much it hurts.
I'm the
Because
same way. I guess that's a Massachusetts thing because
I think it is.
I hurt myself more than I need to by confronting people and say, well, hey, boss, said this and you did that. You can't yell at me for doing that or saying that because you no. Oh, yes, I can.
It's called accountability.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called
I, I,
accountability.
I've done. I got myself into a couple of pickles that way. What are you gonna do?
So high. So high.
Vinny, it has been an absolute pleasure. I can talk to you all day. I'm sure there's a million more stories. Uh,
Yeah.
one of these days, hopefully, we can meet in person. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to speak with me and speak with the viewers out there and telling some of your stories. I thank you.
Listen, I am very honored and privileged to have anybody even want to listen to me about this stuff. My kids don't. When if you ask my kids what do I do, he talks on the phone a lot. That's it. So I think it's great that people care about these things because they were important to us, but I think a lot more important to the people that we were making them for. And it's so great to hear them and to talk to you, and to kind of feel that energy because the stuff that's behind you, that's some great stuff. Really great stuff.
The companies are doing wonderful work. It's the difficult thing is finding enough money to buy it all because it's hard. It's hard. I
It
try
is.
to support the brand and I try to stay positive about the brand and things like that. There's not a lot of positivity out there in the
Yeah.
intrawebs, as you probably know, but
Yeah.
I try to be as positive as I can because I don't like negative.
Yeah. No. Negativity does not get anywhere. Positivity has the potential of
Yeah.
getting, someplace. But listen, anytime you want to talk again, just call me and I'd be happy to do it again.
Thank you very much. And
All
you take
right.
care and we'll talk to you another time. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.